Welcome, Kelly. Always great to see you. I'm sure most people know Kelly already. She's the driving force behind the Cardiff Capital Region and was key in designing and establishing this challenge fund. And she's going to give us her thoughts on, who knows, we're here to find out what then. She's going to introduce the session, talk us through the aspirations of the challenge fund, and also, I think, give a brief impression of Vaughan. Over to you, Kelly.
I'll do my best. Thanks very much, Rick, and good morning, everybody. It's really good to see you all and to see the different sets of interest, I suppose, in this morning's session. So I'm going to talk very briefly about the genesis of the Challenge Fund and how it works with our Infuse programme, which is about building innovative future services capability. Why there is a strong focus on local wealth building, why that's important to us in the capital region, and then a little bit about the objectives for today. So I suppose the first thing that I really want to say, which I'm sure you're all well aware of, is that there's a huge amount happening on the innovation and research and development front at the moment on a UK-wide level. So the government has recommitted to the 2.4% of public spending going on research and development, which is significant because it puts us on a par with OECD countries. There's a new research and development places strategy, the emergence of a UK-wide innovation strategy, which is sponsoring this prospect of new innovation deals, which could impact regions really, really positively. We've seen the establishment of ARIA, a high-risk, high sort of research-intensive organisation. And this week, we saw the Prime Minister resurrect the old Office for Science under the Chief Scientific Advisor, Patrick Vallance. And in Wales as well, it's really great to see that the Innovation Brief now sits within the Economy Department. And there's been some really important work recently, which Rick and Kevin were involved in, Cardiff University along with Amplify, in terms of making recommendations to Welsh Government on a future innovation strategy and framework. So it's a really key time. And I think what I wanted to say is there's a really, really significant role for public services to play in that much wider agenda that I've just been speaking about. And I think public service innovation has to be part and parcel of this much more networked and systemic approach to innovation that I think we're seeing develop. So the COVID experience has been a really, really good one for public service. We've seen unprecedented levels of innovation. And I think this real re-emergence of what it means to be a vocational public servant. But as I'm sure you'll all agree, you know, that the typical view, though, of public services is that they can be quite slow and, you know, sometimes risk averse, overly bureaucratic. And I think, you know, that's a really interesting perspective because it's not my lived experience of the public sector, but we can't get away from the fact that in Wales, we're really dependent on the public service sector for jobs. So I think my challenge and I think my thinking in starting to develop this challenge-driven approach and this movement in the Cardiff capital region is how do we invert that typical perspective that the public sector can be a bit of a drag anchor and actually see it as a huge opportunity to drive innovation, research and development across all sectors in the region. So of course we're in an environment currently where big societal challenges and problems are writ large. I particularly like the work of UCL's Institute of Innovation and Public Purpose, where they've taken a very different approach to bringing together, you know, the wider sort of, you know, private sector technology-led approach to innovation with what the public sector can actually do. So what they've talked about really is how the COVID crisis, the climate crisis, and the crisis that we have in the UK around low growth and productivity can actually be linked and connected. And what they say is that, you know, the public sector has a massive role to play in convening around some of these big challenges. You know, we're not just a small part, we can actually be the ones that can coalesce and develop, you know, interest, activity, ideas, networks around some of these huge challenges that could really have an economic as well as societal impact. So this is what they call mission-driven thinking. You mentioned that at the outset, Rick. And I think that approach has really captured our imagination in the Cardiff Capital Region, because we can show how responding to some of these really big challenges around food security, the climate crisis, high streets, future mobility, healthy aging, can really have that kind of transformational impact. So really, really important, because I think what we've seen in the pandemic is some of those sectors that I've just talked about being hammered in particular, and we still see that impact today. But I'm really, really interested in using challenge funds, not just to drive economic growth and to sort out societal problems, but to think about how we do economic growth in different ways. And by that, I mean much more inclusive and distributed growth. And that's really important for me in the Cardiff Capital Region, because we have some of the most prosperous places, cheek by jowl with some of the least prosperous. And shaping a challenge fund allows us to really think about how we develop these interventions, the form and shape that we give them, how we can make them equitable, have a much more sustainable impact, have ripple effects, impact supply chains, and perhaps get to some of those places that we haven't quite got to enough in the past. So lots going on, as I've said. I just wanted to talk briefly about research and development, because what we're trying to do here is research and development in the public sector. And in the Cardiff Capital Region, our rates of research and development are low anyway. But if you can consider that our rates of adoption of programmes like GovTech and SBRI are really high, that has got to be an opportunity, not just to impact public service innovation, but to make a contribution to the wider innovation agenda. So why local wealth building? I think I've probably already started to talk about it, but it's not just about those sectors that have been hammered by the COVID-19 pandemic. I think, what we're really keen to do is to think about the traditional tradable economy, but how it interfaces with the foundational and the everyday economy. We don't want to separate the foundational economy off, because some of the stuff that we're doing in the everyday sort of tradable economy can have a really big impact and significant implications for the foundational economy. It's place-based. We can drive supply chain, supplier benefits. We can think about skills. We can think about the wider social agenda through this area of work. So we want to use the role of the public sector to convene around some of these challenges. We've had some really good ones to date, but we want some more. So already we've got some councils starting to look at food security and resilience. We've got some other public bodies who are really interested in the climate crisis and how we tackle different aspects of it. We're looking at things like the future of public service fleets and what we do with all these vehicles to be able to reach net zero, but through different business models and through embracing innovative thinking. And I think as well, whilst we've got some really good stuff, we want to develop that even further, because we're not short of challenges at the moment, are we? So this has to be a great opportunity to really reimagine what local wealth building could look like. And as public bodies, how we really sort of embrace this opportunity to optimize and to really leverage the impact that we could be making. So Gareth will talk in a little bit about the Challenge Fund, what makes a good Challenge Fund. Rick will talk to some of the shape and the scope of the programme. But I suppose what I really wanted to say is the importance here is we've got to be able to think differently, and we've got to give a structured process to be able to think differently. So we don't want, solutions and ideas that are already on the shelf that can be bought anyway. That's not innovative. We need different thinking if we're really going to stand up and solve some of the big problems that are with us today, intractable problems. And the reason I really like this Challenge Fund approach is because it allows us to experiment. It allows us to get things wrong. It's a really safe way of failing, but learning from that failure and embedding that learning into what we do in the future. So what we've really tried to do as the Cardiff Capital Region is not just establish this challenge fund. It's only £10 million. It could grow and develop beyond that. But we've tried to put it together with a programme around building innovation capacity in public services. So the two things can work in tandem. We don't want just capacity, we want capability, we want competence to be able to apply our thinking and solve real world challenges in real time. So I think today is about sort of getting engaged and infused. It's about really challenging ourselves to think about some of those big opportunities, not just challenges, opportunities as well. How we can work together, how we can form a network. As Rick was saying, the community of practice stuff is really, really important. It has to be a safe space for people to be creative, to build a network and to come together. But, you know, as my old friend Andy Middleton always says, you know, if we're going to get better answers, we have to ask better questions, and better questions will only come from constantly nourishing our mindset, being around other innovators, really thinking about how we can stretch out our thinking. So that's really all I wanted to say. Rick, I can already tell that we're a group of kindred spirits. I'm sure there's going to be some really, really good discussion. But remember, everybody, that the purpose of this is to stimulate research and development in the public sector, is to make an impact on the wider innovation system, is to really think about how we can do things differently in Wales, and maybe build up a real strong reputation for how in the Cardiff capital region and in Wales, we can look at innovation differently, drive forward different solutions that will have both an economic and a societal impact. So I hope it's going to be a really enjoyable session. There's going to be some technical bits, I think, for us all to get our heads around. But I'm really looking forward to the breakout groups, the ability for us all to ask some of those daft questions, but to really get a feel for the spirit of what we're trying to do. And last thing from me, you know, no idea is too mad. You know, we want really, really radical things if we're going to be able to deliver that transformative impact that I spoke about at the beginning. So thank you very much all for your time, and I look forward to engaging in this morning's session.
Terrific, thanks Cal. I'm going to move us straight along to introduce Gareth Browning, who heads up the challenge team for the Cardiff Capital Region. When we got this off the ground, I think Gareth and I saw more of each other than we did of our partners, but I'm pleased to say that's not quite the case now. Anyway, Gareth, over to you.
Lovely, thanks Rick. Bore good morning everybody. Great to be here this morning. Wish it was in person. So yeah, following on from what Kelly's talked about, I'm going to speak a little bit about why we should run challenges, what makes a good challenge, and give a bit more of an intro into the Challenge Fund. And hopefully, convince people, if they're not already convinced after that very sort of energetic and enthusiastic presentation from Kelly, that challenges are something we should be doing more of. Next slide, please. So why run a challenge? In simple terms, public sector have got something that needs to be fixed. Now that can be, it can be a policy objective you're trying to deliver against. It could be operational needs, but something that isn't working, that isn't working, that you want to fix. As an organisation, you want to stimulate innovation, so that you can't go to the market and just simply procure an answer. That there's that real desire to stimulate that innovation and try different things. There may be very specific issues that you're looking to solve, and we'll get some examples a bit later on some challenges from Scotland and also from the Welsh Ambulance Service. But you may have big strategic, sort of more complex challenges, and within the scope of the Challenge Fund, anything kind of goes. This is an experimental fund, so we can look at some of those big challenges around addressing the climate crisis, the health challenges facing us. So we can work with the challenge owners in actually shaping the challenges, be they specific or more strategic in nature. Perhaps you want to break through public procurement framework, so where procurement isn't working for you and you want to try things that are different. Creating new markets for things that don't exist. This is has been a sort of strapline from Innovate UK for many years, and there's been reports written, but very much using things like the SPRI process and mission-driven thinking and Nesta challenges is all about sort of stimulating these new market opportunities. Another reason is, within your organisation, you want to stimulate that innovation culture, and quite often as public servants, we don't always like to admit that we don't know all the answers, but as part of that cultural change, we need to start being more open in sharing our problems and challenges with the market, and realizing that we can actually get better solutions and innovation in doing so. Another reason is to do with stimulating that cross-boundary and cross-sector working. Quite often you can find that by reaching out, particularly with some technical challenges, that you can bring technology from automotive into health sectors, for example, or but by exposing the problems and the challenges and the opportunities, it really can create these opportunities that maybe we didn't think possible. And as Kelly's mentioned, the Challenge Fund is a local wealth building fund. So we, as the city region, are really keen to sort of use it as an economic development tool to actually grow and develop the local supply chains within the region. Next slide, please. So kind of what makes a good challenge? And I think probably the hardest thing is to come to this, to a well-defined problem, which is actually worth solving. And what I often say to people, I've been involved in SBRI and challenge-led innovation for around 7 years. And I think getting to that one liner, what is it, really very simply and succinctly saying, what is it that a good outcome would look like from running your challenge? And I think quite often we get caught up in jargon and the complexity of what we're trying to do, but can we actually invest some time and preparation in terms of scoping out what it is the challenge is that you're seeking to address, invest time working with previous challenge owners as well and others that have been there and done it. And as part of the Challenge Fund, we can facilitate and help with a lot of that process, which is, to be honest, the hardest part of framing the challenge, is actually getting down to what it is you really want to achieve. There needs to be potential for innovative solutions, and importantly, the opportunity for multiple competing suppliers and solutions to come forward to really generate that innovation from the marketplace. Avoid solutionizing, which we all tend to do. We jump to what we think we know the answer is, but framing a challenge in a way where we are outcome based is really, really important. And it allows us to kind of go beyond the standard answers, the usual suspects that we quite often turn to. There's got to be, for us to want to invest in challenges through the Challenge Fund, there needs to be commercial opportunities and scaling at the end of the challenge. So very much look into, where do we want to get to in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years from now? What does the market opportunities look like? And how can that scaling take place? What we don't want to do is fund interest in R&D that kind of sits on a shelf and never sees the light of day. So again, this is something that we can support challenge owners with. Another biggie is that the challenge owner commitment at all levels from across the organisation, from the frontline staff right through to directors of service and senior people within your organisation. So you get that real organisation buy-in, and then the sort of the partnerships across organisations as well that can be formed. So a good challenge will match problem owners with the customers, with the innovators. It'll create those strong partnerships. And what we can do with the Challenge Fund to enable this to happen is we can plug some funding in through our fund, which Rick will come on to in a little while. Next slide, please. So I've stolen this slide from Innovate UK on the Small Business Research Initiative, which is one challenge approach. There are many challenge approaches, and we're not going to get into the detail of the different types of challenges today. We can work through that over the coming sort of weeks and months with potential challenge owners. But I think the SBRI process, or SBIR as it's called in the United States, isn't new. It's been running in the US since the 80s. You can see the figures here that $43 billion have been awarded to SBIR contracts. In the UK, it was introduced in 2001 and kind of reborn in 2009, and over £500 million in research and development contracts have been let. So none of this is new. None of it is actually that difficult. It's just having the confidence to get involved in challenges. And I think the point there about the state aid or not state aid point is an important one, in that what SBRI as a process allows us to do, which we anticipate running some of our early challenges down this route because it's kind of tried and tested, and we've got a lot of experience and expertise in Wales. is that it allows you to procure in a compliant manner, which is state aid exempt. Next slide, please. So the challenge programme, as Kelly has alluded to, we've got two components to it. The £10 million challenge fund that I head up. We've got the sister programme, which is the Infuse Innovative Future Services Capacity Building Programme. And it's very much that, they're very complementary in that we have the fund to enable funding of the actual challenges, but the sister programme, Infuse, is all about building the capacity of our public servants and public officers. Next slide, please. So we've got a team that spans the Cardiff Capital Region, Cardiff University and Lab. I should probably have on here as well a kind of dotted line to our kind of wider network of stakeholders. We're working very closely with Welsh Government, with Innovate UK, the Knowledge Transfer Network, the SBRI Centre of Excellence. We've got Terry from Scotland today. So there is a much bigger team that kind of sits behind the Challenge Fund that we can access a whole wealth of experience and expertise. So we have got a fantastic team that's been pulled together here. Next slide, please. So what is the Challenge Fund? Its aim, put simply, is to build local wealth through creating market opportunities for organisations across the CCR by inviting them to propose solutions to public sector challenges. What is the art of the possible? Let's think differently and use this the Challenge Fund to give us kind of permission to do that within our organisations. And the starting point for all challenges is the public sector bodies within the region, be that local authorities, health boards, any public body in the region, is to kind of scope out, define the challenges and work with us. And Rick will come on to that in a moment. Next slide, please. I just wanted to sort of lastly flag this Infuse slide up here. We've got Christina on the call today, and I also, I would encourage people to follow on Twitter, CCR Infuse. We've also got an email address here for infuse@monmouthshire.gov.uk, and I would encourage people to make contact with the Infuse team from a kind of personal development point of view, from developing your team. It's a fantastic opportunity to gain those skills and those sort of innovation skills. And potentially feed into some of the Challenge Fund stuff as well. So, please take up the opportunity to link up with our Infuse colleagues. I think that's me now before I hand over to Rick to go into a bit more detail on our Challenge Fund offer.